Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hey guys, welcome to Oxford from the Inside, the good, the bad, but always the truth. Today we're here with Maga and Rebecca. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I do Spanish Soul at Trinity College and I'm going into my second year.
Yeah, hi, I'm Maga. I do French and Italian at Somerville and I'm going into my fourth year.
Nice. So today we're going to be talking about admissions tests for modern languages. So to start it off, how did you both find the admissions test? Starting with Rebecca.
I found it very challenging because they are hard. They're meant to challenge you and push you. But at the point I had taken it, I found it very familiar. I was used to the layout of the questions. I knew what it was going to ask me, on what basis and what kind of line it was going down. So I felt very comfortable but uncomfortable at the same time. It was a mix of feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt the same. I think I hadn't really admitted to myself that I was nervous. So I actually felt really sick, like on the day. But overall, once you kind of start it, I found it all right because as Rebecca said, the format was definitely familiar. And also, once you expect something to be hard, it can only you can only really go from there. Like it's just hard or like slightly better than you imagined. So yeah.
That is a good point. Like, if you expect it to be really hard, it can only really go up from there. Like in terms of your in terms of your expectations. I think it's completely natural for anyone to be nervous for their admissions test, like any exam, but not as stressful as exam. So starting with modern languages, well, I hear that there's a difference between an admissions test if you've studied the subject A level and if you haven't. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's the case.
So starting with like the admissions test, if you've done like a language A level, how are those admissions tests structured?
Okay, so for a sole language or any language that you have studied before, you have a 30-minute test, which is kind of split into about 3 parts. So the first part is where you have got a gap where you have to fill it in with the right conjugation of a verb or the right preposition or something that fits in it that you have to select out of the 3, kind of like a multiple choice. And then there are the grammar, where you're given the verb and you have to conjugate it to fit into the sentence. And then the rest is translations of sentences both into the target language and back into English. And they're all got different marks for different things that you do over half an hour.
And is that the same for any language? So like if someone's done French A level and they're applying for French or Spanish or German, is that the same like structure of tests?
Yeah, it'll be like that for any language that you've already studied.
Yeah.
Nice. And does like a language A level like prepare you well for the admissions test? Would you guys say?
Well, it's difficult because I did pre-U, which is kind of like all the ones, like a lot of private schools do that exam board. And I think pre-U definitely helps you because in pre-U there's like a grammar test as part of one of your exams, which is very similar and difficult. There's no real translation in the same way, but kind of the grammar things that the Oxford test is testing pre-U also tests. But I did look over A-level exam papers and I guess teaching generally does, but the exams looked quite different. I feel like there was less emphasis on the grammar, but yeah.
What would you say, Rebecca?
Yeah, so I didn't do pre-U, I just did normal A-level. And I think to some extent it does help you prepare because you're immersed in the language, you're hearing it all the time. But then I think it is very much an independent task to kind of go that extra step and look at grammar, look at translating on your own, rather than what you learn just from your A-level studies, because it is a different kind of step than just regular.
So,
yeah, definitely.
building on from that, what advice would you have for like students in terms of how to prepare for the admissions test? Like, what did you guys do?
I went through there's an Oxford page where you can find all the past MLATs or all of the past admissions tests for any subject, and some have answers, like the last 2 years have answer keys, whereas the others don't.
Oh, interesting.
And I went through all of them. I kind of spaced it out so that I had some left I've not seen before, right up to my actual admissions test, so they've not all been seen. I've not already know the answers. And then I got my teacher to look at the ones without an answer key, kind of pick up on mistakes that I was making all the time. And I also used grammar books, like specific ones that aren't given at A-levels, or perhaps pre-U's actually, to kind of help me that extra bit with my grammar.
Yeah, I couldn't find answer keys anywhere, so I would just like beg my teacher to look over it. And also, yeah, I definitely got just like a hefty grammar book and just like went through the points that like I would keep getting wrong, because some, after you've seen quite a few, there are definitely kind of hard grammar aspects that they always come up. So that was good to kind of like have secured.
And is the answer key just the answers?
It's not, it doesn't give you any kind of working out either, so it is probably best to go to someone that does know the language to kind of explain rather than just give you the obvious answer, because you could be left being like, well, why is that the correct one?
I guess maybe because, Rebecca, you've done the admissions test 2 years later than Maga, maybe they've released more of the answers since then, potentially.
Nice.
Do you guys remember like any specific titles to useful grammar books that you found, or like a series or a publisher?
I do know for Spanish there is the Butt and Benjamin series, and then there's quite similar ones to that. Like if you were to type that in, you would find other ones for different languages, I think, along the same lines.
What was the name again?
Butt and Benjamin.
Okay, I think that'd be useful for anyone listening.
For French, I would just look up advanced French grammar. There's so many French grammar books, and if like, I don't know, on Amazon or like another kind of equivalent, definitely eBay and stuff like that, you'll find like a good book. Just make sure that it's the kind of, how do you say it, like the explaining version, not the kind of workbook, because sometimes the workbook doesn't have any explanations, it's just the exercises, and that's a bit like the MLAT, so kind of need the explanation bit.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds like you were both very proactive for the admissions test, which I guess explains how it went well for you guys. How much help did you get from your school when preparing for the admissions test?
I definitely got a lot of help in the sense that my school was like linked. It's like a kind of like an academy school that was really new. It was like the second year, and it was linked to a private school. So I would just like go to the private school classes after school, because they have like these whole after school classes. It was like wild. And I would just tag along and kind of go through some of the answers. And then again, I think if you're proactive and you ask your teachers, because normally I guess it's the sort of idea, if you don't ask you don't get sort of thing, and I would just always ask my teacher, can we organize a session to go over them? Because if not, I was just kind of with the piece of paper in front of me, like not really knowing what to do with my answers.
No, of course. What about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, my school didn't really help me. If anything, they focused more so on the interview part of the application rather than the admissions test. So it was very much for me an independent task where I would go and find the resources and take them to a relevant person to help me with, and then doing things like sitting them in test conditions in my own time, like in my own space, rather than them setting out something for me to do, which I think was kind of better, at least for me, because it meant it was me putting in the work, me wanting to do it, rather than feeling like I had to.
Oh yeah, definitely. Also, I think teachers tend to say, like kind of the different parts, and like you kind of just have to commit to doing the different parts, because if not, like you don't, you want to have like a strong application in the sense of putting in effort to each section.
I think it's useful that anyone applying, like watching this, if they're not getting much support from their school, that they know that, and lots of people haven't and like got through the process. I know I didn't get for the admissions test much support from mine either. And my teacher gave me a book, and then I like took it from there. But so yeah, it is useful for sure. And admirable as well how you guys were very proactive in getting stuck in and getting it done. So moving on to the admissions test, if you're doing a beginner's language. So Maga, do you want to explain a little bit in terms of how the uni also offer degrees for students who have never like done any qualifications for language, and what you're doing?
Yeah, so there are some, I think for most languages, except I know it's definitely not French, and Rebecca, you could potentially correct me on this, I don't know if they don't do that for Spanish either.
Yeah, they don't.
So I think it's French and Spanish, but say German, Italian, kind of Greek, Russian, they all offer beginners languages, which basically means you don't have to have done an A level for it, and you do get taught it from scratch. Although I would say like you do have to prepare quite a lot, because I mean I have not spoken to like anyone who was like prepared for the beginner's language, because you do they kind of give you stuff to read in the target language like kind of your first week. Like it is difficult, and I had obviously just done bits and bobs, but yeah, so the beginner's language is different in that sense, and the test is different, the admissions test.
Yeah, so go
on. No, please ask.
No? So how is the beginner's language test different to the sole language test?
So the beginner's language test is different in the sense that everyone who's doing a beginner's language, whether that's kind of Italian or German or Russian, you all do the same test. So it's not language specific, and it's basically just trying to test I guess your like natural or like practiced ability to kind of work out kind of patterns in language and the structure. So the test it's definitely not translations or specific grammar points, because it's a made up language. You would sort of have phrases, and you'd have to and then a kind of comparative phrases with like an English translation, and then you'd sort of have to work out what word is what, or the structure of the sentence, like the verb, the object of the sentence, like, you know, who's speaking, that sort of stuff.
And so say someone's applying to do like beginner's language in Russian and someone else is doing one for German, would they have the same test? Do you know?
Yeah, they would. So it's just a made up language, which is definitely a bit jarring when you first see an exam paper, but after a while you know that it's not going to make sense. You just have to make it make sense in the sense of finding patterns.
I don't know a lot about languages, but how do you test someone, even if it's a made up language, on their ability to like learn a language if they're going into a language that's Latin based and something that's not Latin based? Like how does that work?
Well, yeah, it's definitely so tricky. Like obviously the people who've made up the tests are really, really clever, because it's so weird. But I guess they take different aspects of different languages. Like some tests I would do and they would have kind of agreements, like kind of feminine or plural agreements, and then obviously coming from like a background in romantic languages, I would recognize that and be like, okay, cool, this is an agreement, therefore like this means dog, but like in this version it was plural, therefore, you know, I would make some sort of conclusion. I'm obviously not that familiar with German or Russian, I guess like non-romantic languages, but definitely they had aspects of kind of other grammar that they would put into the test that I would sort of just have to find the pattern for. I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh right, they're making reference to like this non-romantic, or I can't really remember what it's called, but like language sort of family.
Oh, that's interesting. Damn, sounds pretty tricky. Sounds pretty tricky. Do you have any advice on like for upcoming students who are going to take that admissions test?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think sort of similar to what Rebecca was saying for the kind of, I guess, normal language, the A-level language, like I would go online, find all the past papers and just kind of like spend your weekends doing them, because that's pretty much what I did. And it's actually really rude of them because they don't have like the answers. Maybe they do now, because obviously I did mine quite a few years ago, but and you can't really go to a teacher because it's not like the teacher understands. But I guess it's like because you only have half an hour to do it, which is another crazy thing. Once you finish, you can spend like, you know, I spend like an hour and a half longer just going through and trying to work it out very slowly, and then you kind of start to see more patterns. And then it is kind of like anything with practice, you get better because your brain's suddenly like, right, this is going to be the same because 3 tests ago it was a similar idea or a similar structure. So the more tests you do and the more time you spend kind of going through it later, the better. But I wouldn't, for anyone kind of watching or listening who finds it a bit overwhelming, like I really wouldn't worry, because not only is it supposed to be difficult, like it is just really strange. Like you've not been prepared for it at all in your studies. It's just a test to like see. So if you treat it like that, you're kind of, I feel like you're likely to do better because you'll be less worried about getting it super right, if you see what I mean.
Well, something I wanted to ask you both. Did you find with both the tests that 30 minutes was quite a short amount of time? And did you have to like practice the past papers to like be quick enough? Was that the case?
Yeah, for me it definitely was. I wouldn't recommend starting like your first admissions test to practice one, sitting down for half an hour and trying to do it. I would gradually try and work up to that, because it could be so overwhelming to just see that, not be able to do it in half an hour and get so disheartened so early on. I think definitely take a few, because there is quite a lot. There probably is about 10 minimum online. Whether they keep adding them or remove them, I'm not sure. But definitely spend quite a lot of time early on at first, and then train yourself to do it in about 40 minutes, then 30, and then keep doing it in 30 and see where you get to, what's taking up most of your time, what you could leave, come back to, maybe do it in a different order.
Yeah, that's really smart. I wish I did it like that, because I straight up just went for it, and it was really just kind of disheartening, because I'd be like, great, I can't do this. But obviously after the third test, and after kind of really spending time with like a grammar book, or in terms of the beginner's language, kind of just dissecting the test, it does get easier. And even by the end, like I definitely wasn't finishing the beginner's language test, which was obviously really frustrating. And I don't think in the actual thing in the kind of real test I even finished it, but you just try your best. And another thing that really helped me was seeing that it's not like you get 1 mark for kind of one question. Like they'll see different things and they'll give you marks based on that. So I found that really useful.
Oh, interesting. I was wondering, it's unlikely, but back to the admissions test for the beginner's language, are there any books or resources that could potentially help? Like I know that like stuff that describes how language is made. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if you do some Googling potentially, I did remember finding one in my like school library. I think it was something to do with linguistics, because it is kind of the thing that I was describing at the beginning of like the similarities in Romance languages. I guess if you did that with languages that you're not really familiar with, say if I did that with, is it like Slavonic? I'm not really sure, like roots languages like German and Russian, it'd be interesting to see sort of those grammar points, so then I can like try and make sense of this random language and see if it has any elements of the languages that I'm not familiar with. I think that would have been smart to do. So yeah, maybe a linguistics book or a history of language.
Oh no, yeah, that doesn't make. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, at least. Looking up grammar points from different languages to prepare for the test, for sure. I know this. Lastly, to finish off, how important is the admissions test overall for the overall application for modern languages and beginner's language? Starting with Rebecca.
It is important, like every other part of the application process, but this is more so a show, like on the spot, what you're capable of in half an hour. Can you do this? Yes or no? How do you approach it? But if you're like really stressed about it, it's a really daunting part. That I wouldn't worry too much, because there's so many other factors that are taken into consideration during an application, and this is just one of them. And if you're good at them, if you get really good percentages on them, that's great. But if it's kind of your weaker area, then you've got other areas that you're going to be so much more stronger in, and it'll be completely fine.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I would just remember that there are different parts, like obviously it's like your submitted work, there's like the interview, and for modern languages the percentage of people who get interviews is quite high, so you're likely to have that as a factor, and of course the admissions test. So I wouldn't worry too much as long as you kind of try your best. Plus with I'm not sure how much it works with beginner's language, but with kind of post A-level languages, if you do quite poorly in that section, there are ways that you can catch up in your first year of university. Like they don't discount you if your grammar isn't great, because obviously languages are generally taught quite poorly in secondary schools, so they don't expect like your grammar to be perfect. And so if you're not going to be able to cope with the course, you know, they'll give you classes, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's like, not a universal thing that all colleges every year do, but is something that some colleges, some tutors will do depending on the cohort, right?
I think, well, obviously with French, I remember on my timetable sheet there being like grammar classes, and they were ones that were optional, that for the people who hadn't done so well in the test, kind of, they were compulsory, whereas everyone else kind of, if you felt like you were struggling with grammar, you could go. So so it's pretty cool. I don't know how much they do that with other subjects, but with languages, or at least with French.
Oh wow, I didn't realize there was such an established thing like beforehand. That sounds really good. It's like to support anyone who's behind in grammar. Definitely could do more of that in the other subjects, for sure. But I think that's all that we've got time for today. Thank you both so much for such an interesting conversation. And I feel like I've learnt loads more about the admissions test. I'm not sure if I'd back myself to do it for sure, but I'm sure it's very useful for upcoming students to listen in on. And for the viewers watching, make sure you follow us on whether it's on Instagram or Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll see you next time. And yeah, thanks for being here, Rebecca, Maga.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys later.